Hi, I'm David Goforth with the Cooperative Extension Successful Gardener. Today I want to talk a little bit about cover crops and getting our garden ready for next spring. But first let me talk a little bit about where I'm located out here. Today we're taking these pictures at Atando Road at the farm incubator site. The purpose of this site here is to help people get into farming. Farmers that are wanting to start farming have got a number of things against them. First of all, it's very capital intensive to get into farming. Second is the land. And third is just the knowledge of how to farm, and also finally is the customer base. And we're trying to solve all those problems out here by leasing a person a small acreage of land where they can practice farming. We have some of the land, some of the implements on site, equipment they can use, and so their capital cost to get in won't be as bad. And hopefully after 2 or 3 years of nurturing them with their business, they will have a customer base and they'll have the knowledge till they can go on out and start their own business. To get them started here, we've got this area here that we have tilled in the weeds that were on site. Basically, we bush hogged it real close and then we tilled them in. And this is something you could do on your own lawn or garden. If you're wanting to swap to a vegetable garden, you can take a mower and mow your grass real close and then take a shovel and turn it over this first year. Another option would be to take Roundup and spray Roundup along the grass, kill the grass, get it out of the way, and then you'd be able to go in and till a little bit easier in that situation. And I've done it both ways. I've taken a shovel, and over the course of a winter, you wait till the soil is a pretty good temperature, or a pretty good moisture level, and then you can turn it over. If you're going to use Roundup, you need to wait, make sure the temperature is above 50 degrees, but you can kill fescue grass with Roundup anytime the temperature gets above 50 degrees. Once you've got your ground turned over, you can plant a cover crop. We've planted 3 things out here. We've planted some rye, we've planted some clover, and we planted some hairy vetch. These are available either through mail order or through some of your local farm stores. You can get these here and grow them over the course of the winter. The reason we try to grow a cover crop is to add carbon to the soil. This is not as critical for a garden where you can bring in composting material, but in a large scale situation like we have out here, it's very difficult to make enough hauling material to a compost pile, make enough compost, and then scatter it out over the field. We try to grow a lot of this carbon in place. And once you grow the carbon in your cover crop, like the rye or the vetch, then you can till that in, and that will help your next crop. It'll do 2 things for you. Number one, if you've got the carbon in the soil, you're going to put more nitrogen into the soil one way or the other. A lot of times microorganisms will do this, and that's particularly true if you get earthworm activity. But once you've got some carbon in the soil, you can put some nitrogen in there. It's a lot cheaper than having to purchase nitrogen and put it out yourself, and a lot easier. The other thing carbon does for you in the soil is if you get a good carbon to nitrogen ratio in the soil, then your plants are going to be a lot more resistant to disease going into next year. Now, a lot of times in a garden situation, we can bring in enough compost. We can get enough leaves or grass clippings and things from the area and bring that to it. So it's a little bit harder here in a farm situation where more difficult and a lot more material would be required. And so cover crops are a little bit more valuable here. The major cover crops, again, that we're using here are rye. Rye is very good. It grows very well in cool weather. It'll grow on down to about 40 degrees and will continue to grow on during the summer, during the winter. In the January time frame, you'll still get growth, and all this can be turned in and provide carbon for you next spring. The hairy vetch is one that will provide a little bit of nitrogen fixing capability over the winter, and again grows in very lower temperatures. We did put a little crimson clover out here. We were a little bit late on that. You want to normally try to get your crimson clover planted in the September time frame. Generally by the 30th of September, sort of your last date to get crimson clover planted. We were a little bit later than that here, and then we had a little bit earlier cool weather, and so we're not sure. It's still sort of nip and tuck where the crimson clover is going to make it when we hit these first frosts. But crimson clover is also a fairly good cover crop when you can allow it to go a little bit longer in the spring. It will fix nitrogen, but a lot of the nitrogen is fixed in the October to May time frame. And so where you're going for an early garden, it's not going to be as valuable a crop. There's some other clovers that you can plant during the winter, but those are the major ones that I like to use and have used over the winter. During the summer, we can also use cover crops. One of the favorite cover crops is buckwheat. Buckwheat is very easy to grow, very easy to till in, and very rapid. And so you can till it in a number of times, and that will cut down on the amount of weed population that you've got. The weeds that come up will get tilled in and suppressed, and they'll do that several times. You reduce the number of weed seeds in the garden, and you'll have less difficulty getting a garden started the following year, or running a garden and cultivating the weeds out the following year. So you can use it for that. some of the other cover crops that people will use during the summer is the sorghum is a very large cover crop, and that's very hard to till in with a home scale, and so it's not used by home gardeners very much, but it does provide a lot of biomass, a lot of carbon in the soil if you use something like sorghum. And then if you have time during the end of the season, like sometimes you'll plant something in the beginning of the season, once it's finished, you can come in with a cover crop like regular cowpeas or field peas or southern peas or green beans, or sometimes another cover crop that will fix a little bit of nitrogen, produce a little bit of biomass, and will be better than leaving your soil fallow over the summer. So those are sort of the reasons behind cover crops and the cover crops that we would use in this area, and trying to till them back in the soil and keep the amount of carbon in your soil built up to a pretty good level. Another thing we run into on this site right here, that this site hadn't been mowed in a number of years, and we had a number of sprouts that were coming up, such as this ash tree right here, and it's gotten to about a 3 to 4 inch diameter now, which is a little bit difficult to even pull out of the ground. And a couple of things you can do, particularly in a home situation, you can just come in here and cut this off at ground level and then treat the stump with a stump treatment. One of the chemicals we'll use for something like that is Roundup. At around 18%, you can just treat that around the stump, and that'll keep it from sprouting back. And then after 2 or 3 years, this would rot out and you'd be able to kick it out of the way and go on. Another chemical we sometimes use is 2,4-D. 2,4-D is a little bit cheaper than Roundup, but not as useful around a home lot situation. So that's why a lot of people prefer to use the Roundup for this. And of course, the brush killer, the triclopyr, is another chemical. If you have it on hand, the 8% triclopyr can be used straight, and it will make a fairly good stump treatment that will keep the stump from sprouting back. If you just cut this off at ground level, it would sprout back, it'd still be in the way, the roots would still be there and healthy and alive. And so cutting it off and treating the stump would be the best way of getting rid of this one right here, particularly in a suburban lot home situation. Another thing you might want to consider as you go into your gardening is the pH of the soil and the nutrient content. We did a soil test out here and found that our pH was a little bit low. Of course, we were expecting that from some of the plants that we saw around, such as the broom sage. And we also found that the phosphorus level was a little bit low. Again, it's typical in our soils, but we really couldn't tell that without actually doing a soil test. And of course, now would be the time to work in both of these nutrients, the lime, which will give it some time to react by the next spring. You can actually put lime on any time, but it takes a while for it to react, and so putting it on now will give you a little bit better reaction by next spring. And also the phosphorus will stay here with the soil. As long as the soil is not washing away, the phosphorus will stay here, and so getting it on in the fall of the year is fine, so that it'll be ready for your next gardening season. If you'd like to be a participant in our Farm Incubator program, I need to talk with you as soon as possible. And if you need information on cover crops or getting your garden ready for next year, feel free to give me a call at the office. And until next time, plant and plant for a better world.